The Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin had a lot of things we loved and hated. On this episode, we do our best to tell you whether it's worth getting through all the 3 books, as well as our top 5 best and worst. This is the Mind Deck Books podcast. My name's Philip. I'm the emotionally involved person. And joining me as usual is Pablo, the person who indulges in depression.
That sounds either like very evil or very wrong.
This is my failed attempt at introducing ourselves, because I never introduce anybody. And I fail what all podcasts do, and that's the recurrent introduction for people who actually join for the first time, which I suspect might be one of the reasons why not many new people listen. So I guess I should say that we discuss books. Surprise.
Yeah.
On today's episode, we've decided to do our look at the trilogy, the Broken Earth trilogy. We have already recorded all the 3 books separately, and we haven't been really sure if we want to do like all of them. I wasn't sure after the first, but then we did it. I'm happy we did. I like it more after we finished the trilogy, which is not surprising.
Yes.
So the same we did with the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. So now that we are wiser and we have had time to process this and digest the trilogy, we want to give you our overview of the whole thing. Like, is it worth getting into? It's quite a hefty trilogy. I think each book is about 500 pages or something. It's not short.
Yeah, it's not short, but it's not that long. I mean, I guess it depends on the type of book you like reading usually. I think, yeah, it's about 400, 500 pages.
It might sound completely nonsensical, but I'm a person who doesn't read very much. And when I read something, I feel like it's an investment. And that's also one of the reasons that I've started this podcast, to help you find what you want to read.
No, I absolutely agree. Like, I feel the same way. I'm a very slow reader, so when I start reading something, I want to read something that I know I'm going to like, because otherwise I feel like I'm wasting my time. And of course, I mean, you can always stop midway through a book if you really don't like it, but every time I do that, I feel super guilty, so yeah, I try to avoid it.
I feel guilty when I don't finish a book, so I've stopped doing that, but I did that a lot in the past.
Yeah.
So on today's episode, we'd like to get into the trilogy as a whole. We'll try to give you our impressions and our recommendations or not recommendations, and try to help you decide if you're getting into this long trilogy. And also talk about the writer and her other stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's also a TV show planned and all those news. And then the second half, as usual, we'll just talk about spoilers. If you are like definitely not reading this, to tell you like the most important things about this book. And finally, exciting finale of this trilogy. We have a list of top 5 worst and best things we like or hate about this trilogy, which inevitably is going to include spoilers. Yeah. I'll put a timestamp in the description. If you don't want to be spoiled and you want to hear what we love or hate about this book, one of those points is going to be the ending. So it's up to you to listen or not. So let's get into it. Let's start with the author. We've talked about her like on the first episode of the first book, and we talked about how her background. And when we finished reading the books, she wrote a little bit about her life, and she mentioned that her mother died during writing the books, and I was already feeling kind of emotional about the story, and this added another layer to that, because it's obviously connected to what she writes about. So I felt like that was a point that was interesting. Did you feel like it changed anything you think about the trilogy?
Honestly, it didn't change anything for me.
Okay.
I have this thing, both music and books, and like in most cases, I completely detach the author or like the actor or the singer from.
It's probably a good thing to do.
I mean, I don't know. I do think there is an added value to a story sometimes. Like if it gave you like stronger feelings, I think it's good. But for me personally, like her mother passed away while she was writing this book, and clearly there is a lot of mother-daughter relationship, especially in the last book. To me, it didn't really add much, mainly because like my feeling was always that you don't need to experience anything in real life to create good fiction. Like I think there is this in my opinion wrong assumption that to write about something you need to have it lived on your own, which I mean I never believed that, honestly speaking.
I don't disagree with it, but also I feel like it helps a lot if you have lived through it.
I mean, yeah, but if you're talking about fiction, I mean, of course, if you're talking about like real life, But if you're talking about fiction, I think creating something, like, it always depends on the power of your imagination. And of course, like, real life experiences have, like, add to that. But then you have other writers, like, for example, take J.R.R. Martin. I think what he writes about, like, for example, war and poverty and these kind of topics is really believable and, like, powerful. But he didn't have any problem in his life. Like, he had a pretty serene life.
Yeah, like I said, I agree, or I don't disagree, but I feel like it gives you more stuff to work with if you've actually experienced it. And that's what this information did for me. This whole trilogy felt very raw, or like grounded in feelings. Like not the world, not the story itself, but the relationship felt very mature, well thought out, and it makes more sense what she's being personally dealing with. So I appreciate it. And it helps to write about, like she said herself. So it just helps these stories. So that's what I meant.
No, I mean, yeah, I can agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. So another thing I want to say is that I read her social media and stuff, and I found amusing that she took a trip to a volcano to observe magma and like lava flowing around, and she like got her shoes destroyed or something just to like study what the earth feels like, what actual lava would be like if you fell into it and stuff. She was just joking about it,
right?
But it's funny that she actually took a trip.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the three-body problem is definitely more interesting than the trip to the maelstrom.
Yeah, that's true. So then I wanted to quickly mention like other stuff she's written, and I wanted to ask you if you ever want to read more things from her. So think about that before you answer, and I'll just mention what other things she wrote. Before the Broken Earth trilogy, there was the Inheritance trilogy, the Broken Kingdoms. So there is the Broken Kingdoms, Kingdom of Gods, and the 100,000 Kingdoms. That's the first one. So that's a trilogy, and it's about barbarians, a fantasy trilogy. Very well rated, but not as highly rated as the Broken Earth.
I was kind of interested in this one, mainly because the 100,000 Kingdoms is a very interesting title. I'm not sure I'm actually going to read it.
I read like the summary or like the profile and some like reactions on Goodreads, and to be like very blunt about it, it seems very generic. Okay, it's a fantasy story, and I don't see the appeal. Like I saw a lot of things that were very appealing about the Broken Earth trilogy, and this one seems like there isn't anything to hook you in. Other than I guess there's 100,000 Kingdoms.
That's pretty cool. But
I might be wrong. The other thing that she wrote and has something to hook me in personally is the Dream Blood duology. It's just 2 books. And this one is about harvesting magic of the sleeping mind. And I'm always into dreams. I love Inception and all those things. So I would be into reading this one much more. Have you heard about this one?
I haven't heard anything about this.
It's, I imagine a similar concept, like in the Broken Earth, they control the earth. So in this one, they control sleep and dreams, and they harness the power of sleeping and energy from dreams, I guess, which sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So I would be into that, and it's just 2 books, so maybe I might give it a shot someday. Yeah, so she wrote a bunch of short stories and other things, but these are the biggest things, and definitely the best one everybody loves is The Broken Earth. And that's why it already got a deal for a television show. There was a news article that is very recent, and it doesn't say much. It just says that she got a contract that she will adapt the series. And all it says that Sony gave her a 7-figure deal to adapt it. And the good news is that she will write the script, which is amazing. I'm very surprised about it. So I really hope that she will work with like a good director, and she's gonna be the writer or something like that, because usually they change it a bunch and it's not a very faithful adaptation. So if the writer is actually connected to the project, I hope it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, generally speaking, the fact that the author is directly involved is usually good news.
Yeah, I'm very happy about them contacting her directly and not just trying to buy the rights from her.
Yeah, exactly.
So that seems very promising. They have no idea when, they have no idea if it's a movie or TV show. So anything it is, I'm excited. I think this might be the Black Panther I hoped it would be. Like, I know nothing about the comic book, but when the movie came out, the Black community was super excited and everybody was like loving it, and I was so bored. Like, I like that there are black actors, and I like it's all about black culture and all that, but it's not really. It's just a superhero story, and it doesn't have any message to say. It doesn't have any power to the story.
No, I completely agree. Like, I watched Black Panther as a preview because I had to write a review about it, and I remember when I got out of the preview, everyone was like amazed, and I thought
people were just
pretty boring. Like not boring. I think it's a okay movie. It's just that it's the first or the second of these like super standardized Marvel movies. I understand why people were excited about the whole racial aspect of it, but even then, like, I think that which bothers me sometimes, like with these things, is, and again, I'm not an expert or anything, so I don't want to speak specifically about Black Panther, but just in general, is I'm only if someone wants to talk about like black culture, but black culture doesn't only mean American black culture.
Exactly.
Like, this was a movie set in Africa with Africans, but it didn't feel African at all.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly,
I mean, it felt like Disney African. Like, oh yeah,
exactly.
they have like colorful clothes, and like they
I didn't
want to
get into it, but that's exactly what's wrong with this movie. Like, it's a very important step into bringing black culture into the mainstream, so to speak. But it's not showing it in like the proper way. It's just making it like Disney-fied.
Yeah, exactly. That's what bothers me. It's kind of like when they want to introduce diversity into different shows, and again, that's great, that's awesome, but it doesn't have to be like always a depiction of American society.
Exactly.
Like, if it's a show set in Europe, it should be a representation of European society. If it's a show set in Africa, it should be a representation of African society. That's something that always bothers me a lot.
That's what I meant to mention. So I didn't hate Black Panther. I didn't like dislike it. I was just like extremely like meh, like bored about it. And I loved the costumes and the setting, but that wasn't the point of the story at all. And it didn't have to do anything with the story at all. It could have been like Aliens, and it would be the same.
Yeah.
I talked about this in our first episode about the first book, and I was very curious, where is she going to take this? And I always say Jordan Peele is a good example, where he knows how to use this really well for like using the audience and twisting their expectations, or using racism or different cultures, or representing different cultures and people's prejudices in their face, which I love about his stories. And I was very curious if she's gonna do something with this, and I didn't feel like she did after the first book, but I definitely felt like it was used well after the second book, and then as the whole, both like a point from the point of view of a woman and from the point of view of somebody who's racially oppressed, or like the theme itself, giving a mature, good story that's packing a punch and has something to say. This part is definitely awesome. So it's definitely my recommendation after having read the whole trilogy.
I'm less positive than you on that.
Okay.
I really, really liked certain aspects. I didn't like some others. These would be some of my biggest points when we talk about like our favorite and least favorite points. But
I know exactly. We both know what it is, but we can't say it now.
Yeah. I think in these genres, most of the authors are usually men, and they are usually like white American men. Again, as you mentioned, like people who didn't experience certain paths in life. And I think, I'm not saying that you should read the book because she's a woman and she's black. Like, I think that's a dumb reason to do anything.
Of course.
But I think you should do it because her background and her perspective is clearly present, and regardless of how she handles it, whether she handles it well or not, I think it's really useful in giving a reader such as myself a very fresh point of view and a view on certain topics, which is much, much different from what I have experienced so far, at least in my reading career.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. I just wanted to say that after I mentioned that they are planning to make a TV show out of this, or a movie, I really wish this would be the next mainstream franchise thing. I think the world needs this. I don't mean it's awesome in the way that it couldn't be much better, or there aren't things that I dislike or something like that, but I mean it in the way that this story is right on the edge where the mainstream audience might like it, and it's still great.
Yeah, I think it has the potential to really become popular. I think it has a lot of controversial points, so I think it will spur a lot of discussions, and which is usually beneficial to the success of a TV show.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a good thing. Also, I still want a survival RTS game. I said it. Or some other video game about it. I think this would suit so well, like a pen and paper role-playing game or an RPG, like a video game.
We talked about how I didn't want to join your D&D group, so when you started D&D in this setting, I'm gonna join it.
All right.
I think this setting is amazing, and I absolutely agree. And I don't think this trilogy is absolutely wonderful, and you have to read it, but I really hope and I really think this is exactly what people would have fun with. And it would have something to say in a way that normal people who don't want to spend time with thought-provoking long stories, usually these people, like, you know, people who love Star Wars, they love a story, but they don't want to read Dune. Dune is for nerds and people who like to suffer when they read a book. And I think Dune is the most amazing thing, but I also know that people will never appreciate it for what we like it for unless they actually spend like hours and hours and hours reading it, which the people who need to read those things, they will never do. And I feel like this story might do that for those people. It might be so easy to consume that they will get the message that they need to get. That's what this story is for.
In that, it's really similar to Game of Thrones in the sense that it's a very deep story. It would have been really hard for most people to just approach the books because they're so big and complicated. But the TV show, through boobs and gore, was able to gather like enough attention from the general public. So
this might grab the right people with the wrong intentions, with their like fleshy stone eaters, and then give them the message they need to hear and slide it in under their radar, so they would actually change their opinion about things around the world. And that's what I'm hoping with this. This is what the world needs. This book, I feel like.
I'd be excited if we get to see it.
And so to round up what I wanted to say, I didn't like it after the first book that much. I was intrigued, and then I read the second and third just because of Pablo, because he already started. And the second book was, for me, somehow very easy to read. And the last book, I was like, okay, but it's not awesome. I hoped it would be awesome until the end, which I really liked. So it was like good and bad, but the whole thing is definitely worth it. I just wish there would be more, which if there was more, it wouldn't have the punch that I'm asking for it to have. Like the simplicity of the story is kind of there. Like, you know, like Star Wars is super simple, like, you know, good guy, bad guy, he switches sides, force lightning, exploded. So this story has this kind of ability to do that. Like there's a very simple storyline. I guess that's why I didn't go into other stuff, to keep it like a accessible adventure. That's my reasoning why it wasn't what I wanted it to be, which was like a fantasy mixed with sci-fi, super thought-provoking, like amazing, like something. But of course, that's nonsense. Which is one last point I wanted to mention just before I let you talk, and this is the only time knowing nothing hurt my experience of reading it, I think. Because for some reason I was primed for sci-fi and I kept looking for sci-fi in this. And I was like, where are the spaceships? Where are the aliens? Where is this? Where are they going to space? Oh my god. And I was constantly disappointed that there wasn't any space. And it is absolute nonsense. Like this is just in my mind. So don't expect sci-fi, please. This is fantasy. That's all I went to say. Okay, I'll let you speak finally. So.
No worries. I had like kind of a different, I don't want to say opposite, but I really, really like the first book. I think that's by far the best one of the three. After the first book, I was quite excited to read the next ones. The second book, as you know, as people who have heard the second episode of the podcast probably know, I wasn't very happy with. I think it was too slow, it wasted a lot of time, and I don't know, it had several issues. The last one, it is the hardest for me to judge because like it has some amazing points and some points which I don't want to say they're awful, but they're kind of like, I don't know, disappointing and just not what I was expecting.
It wasn't disappointing, but it was kind of like, I wish more happened, and it was kind of slow too. And we were hoping for the finale, like things would come together and happen, which they did, but like at the very end and during the book, nothing was happening.
No, I think during the book things were happening, but like those were the things that were supposed to happen in the second book.
Okay.
I think it's one of those books where the trilogy is bigger than the single books. I would recommend reading them, like just like buy all three of them, just read all three of them all in one go. In this sense, I would say
it's a lot of books. Okay, so just to finish this first part, hopefully we've given you an idea what this is, which we haven't really talked about anything. This was more like after we've digested the whole thing, we felt like the more we talked about it, we liked it better. The more we like had some space to think and like be a little bit removed. And in hindsight, it's definitely increased in value for me personally a lot. I like it much more than after I finished it, which is a good thing. But at the same time, there were parts of the book where I was kind of like, okay, it's fine, but nothing awesome. And there were parts of the book where I was like, I wish so much that more of something would happen, and it wasn't really happening. And I also felt like the plot wasn't moving forward as much as it should have. Like Pablo said, the last book felt like it should have been the second book, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, it was still really, really nice. And the whole setting with the Stone Eaters, Guardians, the post-apocalyptic, and people controlling the earth, that's all amazing. So just for that, just for the fun of it, it's not a hard read. I definitely say just try it. Go for it. You won't regret it.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, so if you're decided that you don't want to be spoiled, stop listening now. Also, if you're just curious, like you've read the first book and you're curious, should I read the second book? So all the other episodes we've kept to the format that the first half is non-spoiler. So you can still like check out more details about each of the books in each of our episodes, which the episode numbers are 9, 11, and 12. I also forgot to mention that on each episode for each book we were awarding points for creativity and hatred. So the first book got 12, the second 23, and the last one 36 creativity points, which is pretty good. However, the second book got 43 hate points, which is about right, I would say, because 71 in total positive points is about twice as much as 43 hate points. I think that's pretty correct. We loved it about twice as much as we hated it. That's my final recommendation. This book is pretty blunt about everything, but in the end, it's doing what it's set out to do pretty well. So I'd still think it's worth it. So let's get into the spoilers. And what we'd like to do is to talk about the general themes. Pablo has to get some grievances and complaints off of his chest. And I have some few things to mention also, and then we will round it up with our best and worst from the whole thing, which I hope it will be fun.
Well, yeah, most of my grievances are part of the worst points.
Oh, okay.
I was thinking maybe we can just alternate good points and bad points. Like we can start from like number 5.
Yeah, so let's do that then. But before we start, I have like a few quick things that I wanted to get your answer. So I have a few notes. So one of the things that we discussed constantly throughout this trilogy was the main character, Esun, and her character arcs and how she is such a bitch. I'm ready to mention a thing, and I want to know how you feel about it, because it's directly connected to our like disagreement or what you like or dislike. And that's how she just doesn't care about anything, and she kills everybody, and she just makes all these bad decisions, and she hurts her friends and all this. And I forgot to say this throughout our last book discussion. In the third book, they go on a long journey, and after Esun has done a lot of bad things, and there was like a big battle, she leaves with this community, and they take care of her because she's turning into stone and all this. And after she wakes up, she talks to one of the leaders of the community, and they have this conversation, and she's like, oh, I'm part of this community. I belong to these people, and now I have a friend. Maybe I have a friend. Like, what's happened? Do I actually think I have a friend? Is this possible? Am I actually a person? Do I have feelings for somebody? Oh my god! And I was like, well, about time, bitch. I was like, what the hell is happening? And then it like dawned on me that this even justified or like explained it even more, that the whole thing, she wasn't just considering anybody. She's the most inconsiderate person in the universe. Did you feel that?
So in a way, I got the impression that the author was trying to essentially tell this to the reader. So when she was a child, she was essentially cast out from her family. Like her own parents were scared of her and kind of disgust of her. Yeah. And the person who she started to rely on was Shafa, and she was actually an awful person, and she grew up in Fulcrum, and she was taught that she was not a person, she was just a tool, and this led her to become, and also she had some bullying and things like that, so this led her to essentially isolating and basically giving up on humanity, which I understand. I think it can be an interesting development, the fact that she starts as, she doesn't care about the community. Even when she was living in Tirimo, there was just an act. And then finally she starts caring about things. I was a little confused why, it seems like, when she was on the island with Honky Boy, it seemed that even then she didn't really care about the community there and the other people there other than Honky Boy.
Yeah, that's exactly why I was like, oh, she's even worse than I thought.
Which, I mean, it's okay. Again, you want to say that it takes a long time for her to finally break out of her shell and accept people in her life again. But why does this happen then when I guess you could say because she was 40 instead of 20.
I guess the point was that she's done a huge battle and she damaged herself, exhausted herself, and she was in kind of a coma for a bit, and then she finally came around, and that was okay, I survived this, so now I'm gonna consider my life like a normal person finally.
But she was already risking death when she went to Meov, the island with Honky Boy.
Okay, but she wasn't in a coma, I guess. Is the difference.
Okay, all right, I guess so. But to me, I understand what the author was trying to do, and I understand what the author was trying to say, and I think that could be a very, very good idea and a very, very good character development. My problem with it was that in so many situations, it seemed like she wasn't acting like that because of what happened in the past, but rather just because that was her personality and that she really didn't care, and she actually never stopped and started thinking about whether what she was doing was harmful to others or not.
Yes, I hate her so much. You're right. And I can't make up my mind. So what you said is absolutely right. And I can't make up my mind if this worked or didn't work. I agree what you just said. She already had a bunch of children and she's lived in all these families and communities. And after all this, she's oh, I can think of somebody as a friend. Interesting.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, as I said in the review of the third book, I think there was this chapter where this kind of development kind of came to a conclusion where she said, oh, it's basically time for me to drop the act of the spiteful teenager, whatever. I forgot exactly the words she used. And I think that was amazing. There was kind of the author telling the reader, oh, okay, I understand. So far I've written this character to be this extremely cold and distant person towards anyone. And now it's time for her to finally stop and get out of this persona. It was a very, very powerful character moment. To me, it just felt sometimes kind of undeserved, because so many other times she could have, she had the opportunity to do it, and she never stopped to consider I had this opportunity and I didn't take it. She was so far deep in her own head. She never stopped to think this community on this island is actually accepting me, and everyone is helping me, and everyone wants to protect me and love me. And
it's true. It feels very strange, and it might happen because of the world is ending, and there are stone eaters eating your face and boobs, and I guess I am willing to accept it for the sake of a good story arc, but it's stretching it definitely. This is I think I'm talking about this because I feel this is gonna be the reason why people give up on the story. The point of this story is to have a character that's infuriating and goes through very hard things, through hardship so much that she completely switches off and stops caring. Some of the chapters say that she's been hurt so hard that she didn't even register any more pain and stuff like that. And maybe they overdid that a little bit. Maybe she shouldn't have been such a bitch. She should be a little bit more reasonable. That's what I like to say.
My problem was she never even tried. She went through so much, and she had several points where she could have had an opportunity. Even from just an emotional standpoint, if she had opened up a little and then would have just come crashing down, it would have been much more emotional. But when she kills the baby, her own baby, she said several times she didn't care about.
That's awful. Yeah, that was
so infuriating. I mean, that was supposed to be this traumatic moment, but I mean, of course, yeah, it's traumatic regardless, like killing a baby. That's what kind of bothered me about her character the most.
There were so many things that bothered me so much, and I feel like I talked to Jen, and she listened to a bit of me rant about how this character is infuriating, and she was like, I can't deal with this. I would never read this because I would just throw it out of the window because I would be screaming at the book telling her, why are you doing this? Like, why are you such a...
No, I understand.
So this is like a point of the story that I feel like I know why it's there and it serves its purpose, but it also could be the reason why this like new TV show fails, or why this story wouldn't be accepted maybe.
Yeah, I think it would be really up to the way they write the main character in the show.
So tone
and
it
also
down a bit.
on the actor.
Exactly.
Or the actress, I guess. On the actress they choose.
That's gonna make it work or break it, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so anything you wanted to mention before we get into the list?
Who's your favorite character?
It's not Esun.
All right, fair enough.
Well, but then it should be Esun because it's the most interesting and the most interesting story arc. So I haven't thought about it. Is your favorite character Hunky Boy? Hunky Pirate?
Of course, in my heart it is a Hunky Boy. But
oh my god.
No, I would say Shafa is the most interesting one.
Oh yeah, actually yes, that's what I expected you to say.
Well, Shafa and Hoa, one of the two.
Hoa, I wish he did more, but yeah. Based on just first impression appeal, definitely Hoa. And yeah, all the characters are good. Like I remember their names, and I remember their like it's
like you remember Ye Wenjie and Luoji and
yeah. I don't know those people. So speaking of the Free Body Problem trilogy, like you said, Luoji, Ye Wenjie, and I'm done. Like Dashi, who we don't even like say correctly. It's like Dusu or something, Dushu, I forget the pronunciation. Yeah. So I can barely think of 3 names of the Free Body Problem trilogy. Like
Fair
there's
enough.
AA, and I remember AA just because it's a ridiculous name. And the proper character, I don't even know, like the girl. And then there is the guy that I like, and I forgot his name too, like
Wade,
yeah. So it's a simple name to remember. So yeah. So compared to the Free Body Problem, this book has so wonderful characters. Like I like all the characters so much, and I like them for different reasons. Like the father, like breaking my heart with like trying to kill his daughter. Like that's such an awful thing. And okay, so I hate him, but it's a good character in the story. Like, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So I don't know. I have a very different opinion on that.
Okay. Like, it was very painful to read about him, and it was very painful and concerning and like scary to consider how real this could be. And it was possible for me to imagine that people like that exist, which is why I was very worried. Like this might be the most like depression point for me, like all the people dying and all that. This like somehow hit close home to me, like a person who is so conflicted and so loving and hating in one is so terrifying to me that I was suffering reading through his decisions. And even though it's almost like comic book villain-esque, like it's so over the top sometimes, it still had some background to it that I found very scary.
Yeah.
So this character left an impression. So to answer the question, I have to say Esun is the best character because she is such a bitch, but she has so many things to think about and do and like consider, and considering the ending and all that happens with her, it's definitely my favorite character.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that tangent.
No.
Okay, so do you want to do one good, one bad, you said?
Yeah. Okay. Number 5 of good for me was doesn't fall into action for the sake of action.
Okay.
So something I appreciated in this book was that being a fantasy book, of course, you expect a certain degree of action. And I think several situations, they could have had like the Hollywood, like what you like to say, like the Hollywood version of the solution, which is just, people fight and then after a fight there is a solution. I like how she didn't fall into that trap. Like there is action in the story, of course, but it's always put in a place where it serves a purpose and it adds something to the story and to the characters.
I agree.
Like there are no fights for no reason.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So my fifth best is a cop-out. It's like a bunch of small things.
Okay.
I like the details. So surprise sex, surprise gore, swearing, flame farting earth, and all this rusting farts, flaming earth.
Yes, I knew that would come out. That's why I didn't put it.
I hated the surprise sex and I hated the surprise gore at first, but now I wish there was more of it. I want surprise sex scenes with stone eaters and swearing. And it wasn't there.
Okay. My fifth worst point is also related to the writing style. Okay. So I wrote uneven rhythm. We kind of talked about this so far, but essentially it's just that, like, especially in the second book, like nothing happens for a long time and then everything happens at the end. In the third book it's kind of the same. Like some of the synergist chapters, they're super slow. And so the rhythm of the book is kind of like, I don't know, uneven.
Yes. So my fifth worst, the book covers.
What?
I hate them.
Is it relevant?
No, but I hate the book covers.
All right.
It's the most boring book cover for the most amazing and visually creative story I've ever read. And there could have been so many nice things, and the book cover sucks balls.
Yeah, I think they didn't have a lot of money to pay for good artists.
One of the things I have in my notes to mention at the end is DeviantArt and other like website fan art. I put a bunch of links. I don't know if you see them. Yeah. It's amazing. Just anything. Just somebody scribble Stone Eater. Just put something on there. This story, it could be so many. I can imagine so many ways that the cover art could be so nice. Like it could be like a face made of stone breaking apart, opening like when the book opens and something like. Yeah. I imagine like two stone faces like going to kiss and then it like breaks on the pages when you open the book or something, or it could be like so many ideas, and there's like a block of concrete on the book. Like what the fuck?
Yeah, I don't really remember the covers. I remember like
it's
they were
like the most generic, like nothing.
Okay. Okay. My fourth best point is that orogeny was really cool. We talked about, like in the reviews, how essentially it can be used for anything. But in the very first book, I mentioned this already in the review, I think it was the idea of orogeny was really creative, was really good, was very well written, very well inserted into the word. I liked everything about it.
Pretty creative. My number 4 best is Father Earth is a sentient being and somehow is not dumb.
Yeah.
And he doesn't care. Like he's not a person, but he's kind of a person. It somehow it works. Yeah. I don't understand how this is possible.
He wants to eradicate humans. He was the one who wants to eradicate humans.
Yeah, but he's not like, I don't know. I couldn't imagine this could work. Yeah, it somehow worked.
I think it worked. I think it was the right amount of ridiculous.
Yes.
All right. My fourth worst point is something we talked a little about, is the open questions, and in general that the books seem too short. At the end of the book there are so many open questions. I don't know why. There are so many things which I don't know why they were introduced in the story if they were never to be solved. That kind of bothered me because I mean, one we talked about, for example, was why Hoa was inside an obelisk, because he mentions it but then nothing is said about it. And then in the end, like when he meets the other Stone Eaters, he said, "Oh, we've been like rivals and friends and allies and enemies." But okay, why? How? I mean, apparently, like Stone Eaters have been fighting for 40,000 years, but why? What were their goals? What were they trying to achieve at that time? Nothing is said about it. Or, for example, some of the things are kind of implied, but not really explained. For example, the fact that the capital was built on one of the sockets that was used to grow one of the obelisks.
Yeah, they don't really go into that.
Yeah, which was considered like a cursed place because it was connected to the earth and everything. I understand that. But then why did they build the city there? Like, what was the purpose? What was the gain?
That's true.
And yeah, there are like so many of these little points.
Yes, also the children leaving to die and like all these like loose ends of random things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so my fourth worst is Nasun's father. And I mean by that this book is not subtle. They go ham on like the racism and the beating and lynching and oppressing and I don't know if it wouldn't work if they didn't do it as much, but I feel like they did it too much. Like in this I want to include like all the we just talked about, like as soon as like such a bad person and so inconsiderate and everybody's so racist and everybody's so, there are no people in this world that are in the gray area. Like all of them are like just die, and this is like
okay, I will not say too much because this will be one of my higher points.
yes
But yeah, I completely understand what you mean.
So also like just heartbreaking, like this book has all the creativity points and all the like for me all the heartbreak points, like it's not depressing, it's just like it hit me like with things and I wasn't sure how to feel about being hit by them. They hit me with like oiled up dicks, and then they hit me with like people being lynched and exploding into stones, and then they hit me with like fathers killing their daughters, and they hit me with like and I don't know that I want to be smacked as hard when I read a book. So that's what I think is my number. Okay.
Number 3 for me was the multiple apocalypses. So I like the fact that, because usually the apocalypse is either the beginning or the end of a story. In this case, it is both. So, like, of course, the trilogy begins with an apocalypse. There is an averted apocalypse at the end, and also there is the apocalypse which actually happens in the flashback, like the synologist part. In so many stories, like the apocalypse is something that either, like, again, it's a post-apocalyptic story, and so the apocalypse happened, and it has to be avoided in the future. So, you know, it's just what happens. Or it's something that has never happened and you're trying to avoid it until the end. And if there is a bad ending, of course it happens. But I like how in this case, like, the apocalypse was treated more as something that it's not necessarily like, you know, something that is unique and something that can only happen once forever. So I really like that idea.
I had on my worst list like the world will end and the world will end, and I'm so annoyed. But then I crossed it out because I realized what you just said, and it's not bad. So yes, I agree.
What's your third best?
The Stone Eaters. I love the looks. I love the lore. I love the ways they behave and they move and how they come to be. I love how they eat people and shit out new people. I love how they eat people's boobs. I love everything about them. The only thing that I didn't like about them was that there wasn't more of their fighting, I guess. Yeah, there was like a thing that I forgot. I was talking before this. I wanted to mention how I'm kind of disappointed that the fights with the Stone Eaters always ended up before they began, and they didn't ever explain. What does it mean to die as a Stone Eater, or is it even possible?
No, you can't die. You just, like, your body gets destroyed and then until you create a new body. Yeah, because one of the Steel's point was exactly they can't die. Like, their essence can't die.
Okay. Yeah, so that's my only gripe about Stone Eaters was I want like a proper Stone Eater fight, ripping of arms and such. And yeah. But other than that, the visuals, I wish this was on the book cover. I wish this was in the new TV show. I wish this was everywhere. And I wish there was a game, Mortal Kombat, but only Stone Eaters.
Okay.
Something like that.
Going back to the bad points, my third worst point is that side characters are irrelevant.
Okay.
Let me explain this. In the story, we got several side characters. For example, Tonki or Ika, or, you know, these other people. Dr. Friendship. Sorry, Dr. Friendzone.
Dr. Friendship is your
no, Dr. Friendzone. They don't really have any character development, which is okay, like they're side characters, but they also don't have any ending. Like, I feel like the third book was missing an epilogue so much, because take Tonki, okay, because she's one of the most explored side characters. She's in all 3 books. She appears in most Essence chapters, and she does a lot of things. In the first book, she's quite interesting. In the second book, I don't know, she's so weird. Like, she does one thing, like, with the needle, but what does it do for her character? Like, basically nothing.
That's true.
And then in the third book, like, essentially, she has lived her whole life to trying to uncover, like, the secrets of, history and the obelisks specifically. And she finally essentially, she realizes her dream as she learns most things about it, and she gets to core point, where she can learn everything she wants. But we don't get any moment with her. Okay, she's in core point, that's it. Like, what's the purpose of having the side characters coming to the final showdown when they do absolutely nothing? Like, Dr.
Yes,
Friendzone dies,
true.
we never get anything out of him. Why was he there? Why did she love Essen?
You have such a gripe with this Dr. Friendzone.
And yeah,
it's true though.
the side characters were very interesting. As you said, the characters were cool, but it felt like they were just abandoned towards the end. Like, they got to core point and then they just disappeared, and the book just ends. There's no epilogue telling us about what happens to Ika, what happens to the children who went away. Why were they even introduced if again they had to just disappear? Like, I don't know.
I'm gonna say I wish they were there even less, because then it would be more tight.
Yeah.
Like, the thing she's trying to go for, I imagine, or I'm assuming, is to have like the story to be accessible and tight, like a good like core story. Like, to come back to Star Wars, the Star Wars is not really like, there's so many characters, but none of them matter. So I feel like she was like going for this kind of vibe, like, okay, this is this core story, and then there is a bunch of stuff around it. Boba Fett is there for 5 seconds, so nobody cares.
Many people care.
So yeah, exactly. So like, Dr. Friendzone should have been there even less. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but I agree. The epilogue should have been there. It would have saved it if they had just a few chapters or just one chapter to wrap up all the characters, like you said in the last episode about the third book. I didn't mind it so much, but I agree.
Okay.
Third worst for me is unlimited power.
Yeah, I knew you would say that. I mean, I completely agree. I know what you want to say. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I already said it. So yes, they did what I was worried about, and I was reading the chapter. We discovered this thing. What is it called? Oh, it's magic! And I was like, damn it!
Yeah. There was still it was not the worst point of the book, but still the ones I understand the less. Like, why did she just call it magic? Like, I don't know. Like, it's so puzzling to me.
Yeah, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, just to make sure, it's that the powers go out of control. They can do anything, which I enjoy if it's limited. So it was very much limited, and it was very much unlimited power.
Okay. Now, my second favorite point, the fact that the heroine is a middle-aged woman, that's maybe one of the very first times I see that in a not just fantasy, like anything that is not like family drama or something like that.
Exactly.
It's extremely rare. I thought it was very interesting. It gives a very different perspective on a lot of things. And it just, everything was really original. Very simple, put it that way, but it's true. Yes.
That's a very, very good point. I swear to God, if they adapt this in Netflix and they're gonna be like a sexy girl playing soon, I'm gonna be so mad.
She would be.
She would be a bunch of complaints.
Woman. She's said to be beautiful, like a few times.
Okay, but she has to be middle-aged. She has to be like a fierce, charismatic, like down to earth. Like, I'm gonna slap you, woman. She needs to be a woman. She doesn't have. She cannot be like a girly beauty.
I absolutely agree.
That's what's good about this story. Very connected to my second favorite thing, and that's the ending. The more I think about it, the more I like it. The mature, like, mother-daughter conflict that wasn't a conflict where people screamed and fought. It was a ending where people understood each other and they didn't really do anything. And it felt so real. And I really liked... I've never had an ending to a fantasy adventure where it made sense so much. It's always either a battle or it's like a climactic confrontation. I don't know. So I didn't expect.
The resolution came out of like talking and sharing feelings rather than just, I don't know, using magic.
Yes, it was just the realization, like both ends understanding, and then just being mature about it, or I'm just like, I wish there were more endings in stories like this. I don't remember a story that ended this way. Like ever.
Yeah.
like a conflict of two characters that was just understood on both ends, and you just let go, and it just hiss.
Yeah.
Just, why is this such a hard thing to do? I really like that, and the more I think about it as a whole, the more it works.
Okay.
So I love that.
All right. My second worst points. Now, this is one of the 2 points, like the second and the second worst and the worst are kind of connected, and this is like what I've been talking about inside my head.
For the listeners, Pablo's like opening his eyes really wide and being like super upset.
So, for the second worst point, what I wrote was no communication at all. So, here's what I mean. You kind of like already mentioned this, the fact that people are like hate, kill. Or on the other side, they're kind of like, I can't do anything. Which is alright. The problem is so many times, so many bad things could have been solved if people even just tried to communicate. Like so many times, people didn't even try to communicate. For example, when they went to Melv, they were on the island and everything else. Alabaster doesn't say anything to Essen about all of his knowledge or anything else. He doesn't say anything.
Yeah, that's all. Yes.
I just can't believe that everyone just refuses to talk. Like, even for 1 second to try to understand something. They never do anything like that.
True.
They never share any experience. And this leads me to my first point, which I'm going to talk about now, just because they're connected. It doesn't make sense to separate them, which is villains are kind of like, as you said, what I wrote, they are cartoonishly evil. If you take the father, so you want to tell me that Jija, so the father of Nassun and husband of Essen, he had this traumatic experience where as a child, one of his best friends got killed by another one of his best friends who turned out to be an origin. This is a very traumatic experience and changed his perspective on, how he sees origins. Okay, so this is basically the justification why he was so quick to just go on and kill his son. All right. You want to tell me that he never talked about this with his wife? Never. Like, this is like probably the most traumatic thing that has happened to him in his life, and he never mentioned this to his wife, living together for like over 10 years. Because Essen never says, I know that, because several times he said that Jija like never appeared as a bad guy. Like, she was shocked that that's how he reacted. Yeah. So, like, what? He never mentioned this? Like, they were married for 10 years, and he never mentioned this. Never. Not even once. And not only that, but throughout the story, over and over, like, people who are racist or origins, or like the same, it's even more evident in Sinologist, like, they seem to be racist just because they have to play the part of the racist. Like, so many times, I can understand that some people would be like that, but most people who are racist, they're not so openly, like, violent and excessive in their racism.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the book is not subtle.
Yeah.
It's just in your face, slapping you around with all this.
And the thing that bothers me the most is that you're constantly, like, bombarded with these people are racist, they're bad. But then the good guys, they do some awful things. They are supposed to get all the empathy. And again, I go back to Jija's case, alright? So he had this traumatic experience, okay, as a child. And he was also bombarded with the same propaganda as everyone else. Now, is that a justification for him to kill his son? Of course not. Like, that's awful. But he gets zero empathy. Zero. Throughout the book, he gets zero empathy, even though, like, he's really struggling to try and accept his daughter. Well, he doesn't try to accept his daughter, I should say. Like, he tried not to conciliate the fact that his daughter is still his daughter and just can't. But again, he gets zero empathy from the author or from any other character. But then you have Essen or Nassun literally killing hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Yes.
And you're just supposed to accept that? Like, it's clearly said that when Nassun and Jija are traveling to the Antarctics to go to Found Moon, at one point they found the city and the city was like, you can't get in, and they try to shoot them. And so Nassun kills the entire city. And, like, this is just glossed over, and then it's never said again, like, oh, yeah, I kind of regret killing the entire city, or kind of, like, that kind of traumatized me. Essen kills so many people. Essen kills all of Tirimo. And Dr. Friendzone is kind of like,
it's everything Esun does is awful.
yeah, I know you killed my mother and like all the people in my hometown, but you know, I still love you. What?
Yeah, that was awful.
Like, they do so many awful things. What I can't accept is that they get all the empathy and the other side gets zero empathy and they're just stupidly evil for no reason. Like, Shafa is kind of like the only exception, but a little bit. Like, Shafa is still considered like evil over and over again, and like the author goes out of her way to say, oh, this is not Shafa anymore. Like, the Shafa you know was like this horrible person, and it's kind of that.
It's definitely...
just to conclude, to me that's what I was ready to consider this book masterpiece if this was done well. Okay. But it's done in a very messy way, in a very like partial way, and I just wish it could have been done a little bit better.
It's one of the most difficult things to do, I feel like, in stories. It's always a touchy subject, it's always infuriating, and it's very uncomfortable to write about and think about and talk about. And the stories that do it and are popular do it on a very surface level. Like you talk about X-Men. That's also why even in the first, before we started, I was like, this is gonna make it or break it. Like this like depiction of racism and evil and like... And I don't know, I'm very conflicted about it, like especially the part you said, how people don't talk to each other. So it's true, and it seems like it's insane, but I've seen people do that, so I feel like it's not that far-fetched. Judging from people I've seen, like not to get any personal or sentimental or say stuff that's horrible, but like I haven't talked to my father for I don't even know how long, and we have had this happen on a very like not serious level. Like we don't understand each other like about anything, and we talked and I have tried many approaches to get over certain things we don't agree with, and we have spent all day like talking about problems, and then we have also spent like not mentioning them at all, and there wasn't a difference. And I feel like at some point you get into this rut of a relationship or this bad like approach to people's relationships that you just don't speak anymore. And that's exactly why I appreciate the ending to this book, because that was happening with Nasun and Esun, and I was very interested what's gonna end up happening, and somehow they worked it out without talking. But at the same time, so many things could have been solved if they said them. And I feel like many people we don't know about don't talk to their wives and husbands, and so many people don't say obvious things. And especially in a very extreme environment like the apocalypse, I feel like the worse the conditions and the worse the interaction with people and the more dangerous you get with like the more this is bound to happen. So I can kind of imagine this, but so having said that, I agree with you, it's too much.
Yeah, I think the synologies part especially was, again, it was ridiculous. Like, yeah, it was.
So I guess I'm gonna just, because you already said your second worst and your first worst, let me say my worst, number one.
Sorry.
So, number two worst. No. It's because it's the same thing. So number two worst for me was the ending of the first book, which we already talked about. How the stupidest decision that Esun could have made just served the purpose of moving the plot. We talked about this at length before, so let's not get into it. But number one worst for me is still Anagist. Everything about it.
Okay.
Exactly what you said.
I mean, I really liked the lore that was dropped there. Like, that's why I was always compelled by those chapters. But at the same time, it was just dumb. Everything was dumb.
I didn't like anything about it. It was a struggle to read. It dragged. It wasn't... The characters there, I don't remember them. Like, they didn't do anything for me. And they should have connected to the characters that were in the other timeline. And they did, but I didn't care at all. That did nothing to me. And it should have done like a good job to build this background of this world. And even on that sense, it like kind of didn't do that. Like, I mean, it did, but okay. Yeah. And then on top of that, all the social, like I was about to mention the same thing, like there's this amazing world. Why do they have like this system of slaves? Like... it was all weird, and it was difficult to read, and it wasn't fun at all, and yeah. So I don't know how this could have been different, to be honest. Like, we keep like hating on it, but I can't imagine.
I mean, had this been like a completely secret project, I can understand. Like, everyone was like ignorant about it. And then, yeah, that would have been pretty easy, but I think like the author was really pushing it to be like, oh, this, like everyone knows about this and no one cares.
To come back to your like point about this being too much on the nose and everybody's like a comic book villain. When I was reading it, I was very committed. It worked for me, even though it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I guess that leads me like to my best point, which is it gave me uncomfortable feelings, which sounds like a bad thing, but I think it was really positive. I mentioned this before that, I mean, as a person who, in my life, I've never had such like a book which really made me feel certain interactions and certain aspects of life, which have never touched me directly. Mm-hmm. And so I think that in that sense, this is a very, very powerful book. And that is like almost single-handedly the reason why I would recommend reading it.
Yep. Which might be the answer to what we just argued or discussed in depth. And that is, if she did it more subtle, the people who need to hear it would miss it.
Yeah.
And that might be why she played it up so much with these evil characters.
Yeah. What was your best point?
So my best point is, I thought was your worst point, which I'm surprised. Can you guess what's my best point? I thought this would be your worst number one.
Really? I'm not sure, honestly.
It's the culmination of the second book that you thought nothing happened and it was boring.
Okay. All right.
I really liked the hints. I had this feeling you just described, and I think this did it perfectly for me personally. Because I was like, something's gonna happen. Just don't do it. And then there was like a little thing and a little thing, a little thing, a little thing. And she was like, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, she's in this com and she's like, everybody's hating on her. And there's like all this tension about, the racism, and she's an outsider and she doesn't have anything to do. She doesn't help anybody and she doesn't care. And all these people are too powerful and we can't control them. Blah, blah, blah. And there were like so many small nudges into like an apocalypse, like a social apocalypse. So she goes to Alabaster and already they don't care about him and he's worthless and he's eating their food and that's the only person she talks to. And then she could save this person screaming in agony and she does it late and badly, and so many small things went to this anxiety build up and people being locked into this place with this person that they have no reason to hate, but they hate her so much and there are so many things playing into the hate. And then it ends with her killing somebody and saying there is no.
And she never regrets like killing her, by the way.
Yeah, of course, but it basically drives her to like, it feels justified at the moment to do such a horrible thing just to stop this escalation of hate. And then there is like a line which I think might be my one of the most powerful moments in the book, and she says there is not going to be any more voting on who gets to be people. And I was like, damn, you showed them, girl.
But like, as we talked about in the second podcast, I just thought that the whole point, like, of them even considering like needing to vote on that was just ridiculous and didn't make any sense to me. But
she did something awful to stop something even worse, and I appreciate the build up, and it was very nerve-wracking for me. And it hit me like I didn't expect her to do that. I expected it to end in something absolutely awful and a bloodbath of bullshit and all this. And by her being awful, she stopped it, which was a surprise to me. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Thank you for your list.
Thank you.
Thank you for sticking with us through this trilogy.
Thank you for letting me get this off my chest.
I wanted to do this, I think.
All this time.
I think if I like something about doing our podcast is that once in a while we do this like a trilogy thing. It feels like it's a justified discussion, and it definitely has a lot of interesting points to say, and it feels like a very, we both said, enjoyable process to think about it more and discuss it in depth. And having it as a trilogy is like a thing that movies will never do, and TV shows will do maybe on a very surface level. So I appreciate that we can experience this story because... Yeah. Okay. Okay. And in the sequel, Stone Eater sex. Grinding stones. I was sure it was gonna be there. Stone on crystal. I was expecting, and they can all regenerate and tear up their bodies apart and grow new bodies. Just go for it. Just have all the fun. I was expecting this after reading about Hunky Boy's dick. I was expecting this to be there 100%. So next time, just have it there. So thank you for the podcast, and see you on the next episode.
See you.
Coming up on the next episode, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams.